Welcome to Behind the Beer, where we go behind the scenes to discover the people and roles of producing the product we all love, craft beer. In this episode, I'm with Jerod Jones, head brewer of Model A Brewing in Fort Mill, South Carolina.
Tega Cay.
Tega Cay.
Yeah,
okay.
we're right here on the border.
Okay.
You know, it's technically we're Tega Cay.
Okay, my mistake.
That's all right.
Jared, if you would, just kind of give us a little background of you and what got you into craft beer.
All right, so let's see. I guess homebrewing wise, I've been brewing since about 2004 myself. But you know, that was when I started homebrewing. Homebrewed for about 14, 15 years before I kind of made the jump into professional brewing. My brother got me into craft beer. It was late 90s and mid 90s when kind of actually mid 90s when kind of he got me into craft beer. But it was the Reedy River Brewing Company, which a lot of people don't know about in South Carolina. So they kind of were before the big craft boom, specifically in the Southeast. Things were happening out west. He had a boss at the time that went out west, saw what was happening with the beer scene. And this would have been, I don't know, 95, something like that.
Oh, yeah. That's early days of
way
craft beer.
Early. Well, so check this out. So he actually opened up a brewery in South Carolina. Now, at the time in South Carolina, you had to be either a brew pub or a brewery only. So you couldn't necessarily even have a tap room if you were a brewery. You were a production brewery.
Wow.
I think at the time only hunter-gatherer was the only craft beer in South Carolina. North Carolina had maybe some weeping radish and some other things going on. But he opened up a brewery called Reedy River Brewing Company. They produced a product called Caesar's Head beer, which a lot of people don't know about. Caesar's Head is a rock formation in the mountains of South Carolina outside of Table Rock.
Oh, okay.
And they produced a few products. So my brother helped them out a lot. So he got into beer. Their head brewer that they brought out from Colorado taught my brother how to brew. So my brother got into home brewing in the 90s. Then when I started drinking beer myself, he was like, hey, why don't you do this with me? Yeah. And about that time, he was moving from extract brewing into all grain brewing. So I kind of started with all grain brewing, helping him out. Yeah. At the time, though, even in the early 2000s, it was a different scene than it is now for homebrewers. You know, we had to really seek out ingredients and things like that. Right. And internet at the time, people weren't shopping on the internet. Right. As much in 2004.
Yes.
As they were in even 2014.
Right.
So we would go to places like Asheville, that homebrew shop, Charlotte, obviously. Alternative beverage was in full swing then. So we were in Greenville. We would drive up to these places to get ingredients. Later on, we homebrewed together for a long time. You know, we were just ordering ingredients off the internet.
Right.
So leap to, I guess, about 2018. I was an elementary school teacher before that, math and science, for 20 years.
Oh.
Fourth and fifth grade.
It
was different. A lot of people don't think about that, you know, but kind of in some ways, I like to say one drove me to the other.
Right.
Teaching is a stressful job, and beer helps a little bit, you know, obviously not while you're on the job, but it helps when you get home. And so the around about 2018 or so, I was driving a long way. I was commuting to a private school from Rock Hill to Davidson, North Carolina for 13 years.
Oh, that's a haul. They
were doing construction for those toll lanes north of the city. Those last few years of my commute, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I was pretty involved with the York County homebrew club we have here, Upper Palmetto Zymergy Society. And just through some connections with that, ended up getting a job at Rock Hill Brewing prior to Model A here. Brewed there for a couple of years.
I think that's where I first met you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think so. Rock Hill Brewing. I did a lot over there. I wasn't just brewing. I managed the place, hired the employees, worked the bar. So I was there a lot.
Yep.
And then my friend Brad O'Connor is one of the owners here at Model A. He liked what I was doing and asked me if I would come brew for them.
Awesome.
So that's what brought me here.
And it's been happiness ever since.
Oh, well, yeah, for me, so my favorite part, obviously, even when I was at Rock Hill Brewing, was the actual brewing of the beer itself. That's what I really enjoy to do.
Right.
I like the process. It's like being a math and science teacher. It's kind of natural. Like I said, it's where culinary arts meets chemistry.
Right.
Works for me, just doing that in general.
So that's all you have to worry about here is brewing.
So here I'm just brewing. I
Right.
don't have to worry about all the other stuff.
Tap room and everything
create
else.
The signs, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here I focus on the beer, and just getting it to the taps, and don't have to worry about it all.
And I think it shows too.
I hope so.
When you have people, when you have personnel, you have people just focusing on the beer, then you get a better product than you have someone who's distracted. So what are we drinking here?
So this is a British Golden Ale, and it kind of goes back to just kind of my viewpoint on beer in general. I really, really like classic style beer. It's what I tend to drink. It's what I like to brew. It's tend to what I gravitate towards.
As do I.
This was a nitro version of our British Golden Ale we just put on tap called Be Curious. It used a Burton ale yeast, Burtonized the water a little bit, so it has a little bit of what they call that Burton snatch, just a light sulfur note. They started brewing this in Britain really to mimic lagers that were coming out of the Czech Republic and Germany. And Britain was all about ale, right? And so they're like, what can we do to compete with this growing popularity of lager? That came British Golden Ale, which is lighter malt, it's lighter in malt than most of the bitters. Still low ABV, only like 4.7%.
Right.
It meant to be real crushable.
Good breakfast beer.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, early in the morning, that's why I thought this one would work. And, light on, because it's a nitro beer, you don't have that carbonation,
Now, is it normally this soft if it's not on nitro?
It is in general. It's going to be the nitro. The nitro softens it up significantly.
Right.
Which I've got a carbonated version too. So when I do nitro beers, I prep a few kegs for nitro. Then I do standard carbonation on the rest. So we don't have the carbonation version up. But no, the carbonation is going to add a little bit more bite to it overall. Okay. So this is more bitter than a typical bitter, ironically. That goes back to, and even now, I stuck with all English hops just because I love tradition. This is Golden Promise UK floor malted. When I brew an English beer, I want to use English ingredients. Modern British golden ales, honestly, are focusing on American hops to differentiate them from the, British bitters.
Right. That's why a lot of them are just calling them pub ales.
Right. And so traditionally, they were using, obviously, UK hops. And so that's what I wanted to focus on. This one's all EKG. It's all East Kent Golding hops.
Nice.
All English ingredients.
Cool.
But that's kind of my viewpoint on beer in general. If I'm going to brew an English beer, I'm going to use English ingredients. If I'm going to brew a German beer, I'm going to use German ingredients.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems to, right?
Logical.
But, it's more expensive that way.
Yeah.
Cost-wise when you're importing ingredients than it is using domestic ingredients. And you can brew great stuff. I'm not saying you can't brew great German beer using domestic malt. I just prefer to use German malts if I'm brewing a German beer.
Oh, yeah. I completely understand. Tell me, what do people misunderstand about you the most?
Oh, misunderstand about me? I don't know. As a brewer, as a person, what? Are we getting philosophical here? What are we doing?
Say within the context of your role here.
Okay, yeah. Now, probably in brewing, I think people. I'll just talk about it in brewing in general. I think people romanticize the position. Actually, right before I even came out here to do this interview, I drenched myself with water. The brewing, you do really have to love it, right? You have to love producing that final product because it's really more dishwasher than it is brewer. I mean, what I do, I'm a team of one, but what I do 90% of the time is clean. And then I brew every once in a while.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I brew 2 to 3 days a week, and then the whole rest of the week is devoted to cleaning. And then I'm cleaning while I'm brewing. I'm cleaning whatever. I'm cleaning kegs. I'm cleaning vessels. I'm cleaning the brew house.
Right.
I'm cleaning the floors.
That's one thing. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't understand how clean things need to be in brewing.
Right. And that's one of those things that I think people just misunderstand the position of brewing. They think that, all I do is sit back with my feet up and write recipes and drink beer while I'm doing so. That's another big misconception.
Yeah.
Is you don't drink beer while you're brewing. No, I'm not saying I'm not. I'm tasting the things out of the tanks. I'm doing whatever.
Right.
I'm not drinking pints of beer while I'm brewing. It's also it's a dangerous job.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with hazardous chemicals. You're dealing with heat. You're dealing with boiling liquid. It's not something that you can go into and do inebriated. Right. It's not. That's a misconception, I think, as well. And that's just in brewing in general. Right.
Oh yeah.
This is physical work. And if you know anybody in the brewing industry and you've talked to them and they're working behind the brew house, you know very well it's physical work.
Yep, absolutely. What's your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
Well, in terms of brewing, I think every brewer's worst fear is having to dump beer, just because there's time, there's cost, there's whatever. But at the same time, if you're not willing to do that, you're not withholding your that's the word I'm looking for, your agreement with the customer, right? If you're going to serve beer that's not up to par, that has a flaw, that has something that's noticeable, and just try to get by with it, then you're not upholding your commitment to the customer and to the craft.
Yes.
Just like anything else.
Yes.
Luckily here at Model A, I did learn from my past experiences. I have had to dump some beer in the past. Luckily here at Model A, that's not been the case. And even then at Rock Hill Brewing, I think in the 2.5 years I was there, I think I had to send a batch and a half down the drain. One of those was because about that time, the popularity on the East Coast of hazy IPAs was blooming big time. They started changing the way they processed hops to accommodate more aroma and things. They started kilning hops at lower temperatures, which actually leaves an enzyme in the hop intact that can actually begin to break down sugars in wort that wasn't previously accessible to yeast. So you get something called hop creep. Hop creep leads to a secondary fermentation in the beer that a lot of brewers, when they started changing the way they were processing those hops, weren't prepared for. And that will result in a product that yeast produce in fermentation called diacetyl.
Right.
Diacetyl lends a slick mouthfeel to beer. It lends a butterscotch note to it. I had a beer. It was the first time I had used Azacca hops. I did entirely Azacca hops. Loaded it, just laid in and dry hop with the hops. Tasted awesome at first, right? Moved it over to the bright tank to serve. Got about a week and a half into it and was like, this changed, right? Something has changed about the beer. That hop creep had set in. And so luckily I had a very supportive boss there, just like I do here. And I had to go to him and I was like, listen, I'm not happy with this product that we're putting out. I'd like to ask if I could send it down the drain. Right. That's a hard thing to do.
Oh yeah.
One, because it left a spot open until I could move another beer and get it prepared. But you have to be willing to make those sacrifices. Again, because I feel like if somebody's going to come in and they're going to pay $6, $7 even for a pint of beer, it needs to be the best beer that beer can be.
Right.
And so, it's not so much, I guess it is a failure in a way. I hesitate to use that word so much as just a part of the process.
Right.
Right. We've all made dishes at home or food at home that you're like, oh, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Sometimes that can happen just when you're experimenting with something in beer, experimenting with a new ingredient, you do whatever.
Right.
But I mean, it's more just about trying to uphold that commitment to the customer and the quality.
Yep. And I'm very happy to hear you say that, because I have been to some breweries in the area that, they put out some stuff. I'm like, in cans as well.
Well, and so part of that may be also, especially if it's a brewery that is pushing out a lot of beer, and they don't have, a lot of breweries don't necessarily have somebody that's constantly looking out for quality control. You know what I mean? Just in terms of small businesses, small whatever. Right. It may be that the brewers haven't tasted that beer in a while, right?
Right.
So one thing I do.
So even after it hits the taps, someone needs to continue to
exactly right,
sample.
Because unless a customer lets you know,
right,
you don't necessarily know. Again, we're not drinking. I'm not drinking pints of beer while I'm back here doing work. I may have one when I'm done.
Right.
But one thing I do every morning when I come in, when my palate's fresh, when I haven't had other beer, because what you have, if you have multiple beers in a row, those first beer affects the second beer's flavor.
Oh, yeah.
And vice versa, based on what's going on with your palate.
Yep.
One thing I do when my palate's fresh every morning, first thing I do is I pick 1 or 2 beers off the tap to try. I'll come in, I'll get set up with what I'm doing. I'll go to the tap. I'll just do a little sample glass of 1 or 2 of the beers, so that by the end of the week, usually I've tasted our tap list to make sure everything is still tasting the way I intended it to taste, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Just to keep that
quality control.
Yeah. That's just, keep QC. Now it's harder when you've got canned product out there in the world, which we don't here at Model A right now. Right. Because you don't know how somebody has treated the beer after it's left your place.
Right.
They don't have room for it in a cooler. It's sitting in the closet somewhere. A lot of craft beers unpasteurized can affect the flavor over time.
Yeah, and I usually don't say anything unless I've got it at the brew house. But I've been very pleased that if I do go back to a brewer and say, hey, man, I cracked one of your cans and it's diacetyl, and they're like, pull them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. No, and they've got to. If you want to protect your product and
right.
protect your brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to make those hard decisions. Nobody likes it.
No.
But, like I said, some of that can arise from the fact that once it goes out the door, you don't necessarily know how it's being treated.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously, it's ideal for craft beer to stay refrigerated, particularly if it's unpasteurized or unfiltered.
Yep.
So,
all right. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Well, again, keeping it to just a craft beer or whatever is just brewing balanced, clean beer. Is really what I want to be known for in this industry. Hopefully, first and foremost, before all of that, I hope people just know me as a good person. I hope people.
I certainly do.
That's it. But talking inside the brewing industry, man, I just try to brew balanced beer. I think is the best way I know how. And I'll be the first to say, I'm a big proponent of drink what you like. Like but I would say the craft beer industry as a whole, it really in the last probably 5 years or so, has done a strong shift, probably maybe even a little bit further than that, away from balanced beer. There were the IBU wars of the early 2000s.
Right.
That wasn't balanced beer. I was there for it at the time. I drank nothing but IPAs, and the more bitter, the better. For like 8 years, it was just like, ramp it up. Yes, more and more. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, man. I had one that I was just like, oh, God, I think it was like a McKellar, like some ridiculous supposed IBU. I don't know if it was supposed to be 1,000 IBU or something like that.
Oh, wow.
No, like they were trying, which really isn't even necessarily possible.
I was going to say, is that even possible?
Well, it's not possible from a tongue threshold.
Right.
Like you can only detect so much bitterness at a certain point. No matter what the IBU above that is, you're not going to detect it. Right.
Right.
But it just tasted like a grassy mess. Right. It tasted like sucking on a hop, but they were trying to compete with that we've got the most ridiculously bitter beer out there. But it's, and then I started thinking, well, is this really the right thing to be doing for beer? Like I said, I was on that train for a long time. And now I want to brew beer that you can drink 48 ounces of, not 4 ounces of. And it seems like a lot of the beer that attracts a lot of new drinkers, which I understand, and gets a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement, tends to be those beers where they're either real sweet, sticky pastry stouts or real chalky, super heavy hopped hazy IPAs. And for me, it's a personal thing. If you love those things, drink them.
Right.
But most of those beers, I have 2 4 ounces, and I'm like, I don't want any more of this beer.
Yes.
And I go back to the fact that, is that a good beer then? I got to ask myself, if I don't want to drink a whole pint of it,
yes,
is it a good beer? But that's just my sensibilities. That's why I love English beer, love German beer, love Belgian beer. Now, obviously, Belgian beers, those can be big, those can be whatever, but they tend to finish dry.
Yes.
And it's the heavy sweets that, to me, unbalance a beer, right? I love Doppelbocks. I love malty flavors up front. Most of them finish dry, right? So it's the balance, right? It's that juxtaposition. I like malty beers. I like hoppy beers. But I don't like sweet beers.
Right.
And I don't like just complete palate wreckers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
oh, yeah.
I'm trying to brew beer that you can drink 48 ounces of, not 4 ounces of.
Yeah.
Now, does that necessarily garner the attention of, the masses and things like Untapped and whatnot? Not necessarily, but we're pretty successful here at Model A right now, and I'm pretty happy about that.
So, what's the best compliment that you've received?
Oh, well, I guess compliment would be, so our first year that we were open, we opened like December 19th of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, right? And we're only open technically a couple weeks in 2020. But 2021, we decided just randomly to take a stab at Great American Beer Festival, GABF, with a kind of, I would say, fringe style at a Rogan beer, which is basically take a Dunkelweizen, which is a dark wheat, and instead replace the wheat with rye. And you've got basically a dark rye beer. Rye is notoriously difficult to brew with. It's very sticky, very glutinous. It makes a mess in the mash. But I brewed this Rogan beer, and we just decided to randomly send it off to GABF. We ended up getting a bronze for that, which from a brewer's standpoint, that's a huge compliment, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I guess that would be it, because I never thought, you always think your beer's okay.
Yeah.
You don't know if anybody else thinks it's okay. You hope you like it. And like I said, I really try to
not only do they think it's okay,
focus on style. Well, right. I try to focus on style, and we've had some success at some other national competitions, US Open, which I believe results are released later today. I think 5:00.
Oh yeah.
Strawberry Kolsch. First year they kind of did things different last year. First year they just had one fruit category. We ended up with a bronze for our Strawberry Kolsch, using local strawberries. So Strawberry Kolsch, that ended up, like I said, doing a bronze the first year at US Open, a gold second year when they kind of isolated by fruit category. So those are always surprises. Never expected. I never really did kind of the homebrew award stuff. I never really kind of focused on it. I was brewing beer for myself. And at the time when I started homebrewing, it was like, I want to brew this style because I've never had it. I mean, not at that point, not even knowing if it tasted accurate, because I'd never had a commercial style of the beer, but trying to read the description, the BJCP, Beer Judge Certification Program description, or the Brewers Association description, and seeing if I could get something close to that.
Right.
And that's where it started. But that was the days that I could walk into Brawley's or Total Wine and I had everything on the shelf. Not that that sounds bad from a liver and a whatever standpoint. But no, it's not that. I just like to explore different styles, right? Every time I went in there, I'd buy something different.
Yes. Yes.
I
completely understand that.
Yeah. I approached beer very scientifically that way, even in brewing. I wanted to know what each ingredient did. Brother and I did a lot of what's called smash beers, single malt, single hop beers to figure out what ingredients did, and then slowly started adding things to them to try to make it, see if we could pick apart what the individual ingredients did. But now, I walk into a Total Wine, and I haven't had 10% of what's on the shelf. Style-wise, I have, but I can't keep, you can't keep up with all the breweries.
Oh yeah. You're telling me.
Yeah, it was crazy. There was a different time, man. It was a different time. It was
especially
crazy.
when you cover the beer scene, you're like, oh my gosh, another one.
Yeah. It's just and that's the interesting thing. It's gone more to neighborhood beer, neighborhood breweries, right? Which is the way it was before Prohibition.
Yeah.
Now I think we're finally past that Prohibition per capita thing there, where we now have more breweries than technically they did even per capita then.
Right.
But in England, it's been that way for a long time. Just your neighborhood brew pub. That's right. That's where you drink. Right. That's where, they're carrying local beer. And it's kind of moved that way in America, but not just carrying local beer, brewing local beer.
Right.
Which is, I think it's cool.
Yeah. Well, even in England, the pub, the public house, I mean, that's where a lot of the community business take place as well.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what's an insult that you've received that you're especially proud of?
Well, oftentimes those happen on Untapped. And don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not okay. So I don't disagree with the existence of Untapped. I mean, I think it was a great idea. Mm-hmm. Keep track of the beers you've drank, rate them. When I start rating individual breweries based on people who don't necessarily know beer styles or haven't researched or studied beer styles, obviously there are some people who have. Seeing some of those compliments or ridicules actually can be quite entertaining. Things such as a Pilsner and saying this is way too lagery for me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
So, yeah, you gave it 2 stars, but thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the compliment / insult, because I hope my Pilsner is lagery.
Yeah.
So it comes out of that. Like I said, it's funny. It's a funny platform in that regard. Right. Where they actually, I have no problem with people rating beers for themselves. The fact that they actually give breweries an overall rating score, really is bizarre to me, because half the people who are out there using the app don't know what a certain style should taste like. Right. And so you've probably heard a lot of brewers talk about that. So I don't have.
Oh yeah, there was one I had a T-shirt made up. 1 star. I hate IPAs.
Yeah. Yes. Then
why are you rating an IPA?
Yeah. Then why are you trying all my IPAs and rating them all? It's again, that's not necessarily what I don't think it's a lot of the user's intent to do harm to breweries or to whatever, but it has affected, I think, the way that tourism happens for, especially brewery tourism, because people will look at Untapped and say, oh well, I've got time to visit 4 breweries in Charlotte. What 4 breweries am I going to visit? Right. And so that you look at Untapped and they might pick the 4 highest scores. However, they're really missing out on the full scope of beer.
Yes.
Because tends to be that on Untapped, the more radical ingredients or higher ABV or higher, the most candy you put in a beer those beers tend to score really high.
Yes.
And then you've got places like Old Mecklenburg Brewery that consistently brews clean, balanced, solid beer.
Absolutely.
And you know what? They're not going to make that top 4. They've got an awesome tap room. They've got incredible beer. and people are missing out.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's kind of the unfortunate part. But those insults sometimes turn into compliments.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's exactly what that beer should have been, even though they didn't intend to compliment it.
All right. What's one thing in brewing venture that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I have to think about that one for a minute. I guess I kind of had it just hanging around the brew scene for, I guess, as long as I have been. I guess I had a pretty good idea of what it was going to take to produce the product.
Right.
I guess one thing I didn't expect and didn't know fully was some of the chemicals that are used at this level. I will say that was a little bit surprising. Just home brewing, you think, okay, well, they're probably using the same types of chemicals that you're using on the home brewing scale, which can be hazardous if you're not careful. But
right.
I mean, for the most part, they're not. They're relatively inert. And then you come to this level, and you're using high concentrated caustic and really high concentrated sanitizing acid. Mm-hmm. That's it's frankly a bit scary.
Right.
I mean, but it just means you have to be cautious and careful and handle it appropriately.
Right.
That was one thing that was a little, coming into it from not a professional standpoint or program necessarily. That was surprising. But I knew ultimately what it was going to take to produce beer. I mean,
right.
If you're doing all grain brewing at home, your brew day is basically the same as it is here.
Right.
You have different utilizations for hop rates and stuff, just because of the amount of time it takes to transfer beer and things like that. But that's something that you can figure out, after some experimentation and stuff. But I don't know. I haven't been necessarily super surprised by anything. A lot of beer, just like any other industry, there's a lot of, Monday morning quarterbacks, right? That have feelings about what you should be doing with beer.
The beer snobs.
And you can be a beer snob and still not.
I prefer a beer connoisseur.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's there you go. You can be a beer connoisseur. But it's just funny. People have lots of opinions about what you should and shouldn't be doing with beer. That did surprise me. That was a little unexpected.
Right.
Like, okay, well, if you don't, again, drink what you like, right? If my viewpoint on beer, if you don't want balanced beer that you can drink, 48 ounces of versus 4, then don't drink beer here. There's lots of options.
Right.
There's lots of options now.
Yeah.
That's a little bit unexpected, but that's with anything. It's not just beer,
right?
It's
absolutely.
It's every single industry has the same struggle, but ultimately,
right.
So
what's a common myth about being a head brewer?
And I may have touched on that a little bit, which I think I kind of did early on, about the fact that, we're brewers. It's
right.
the best job in the world. All you do is drink beer and talk about beer and do whatever. No, I'm working my butt off, man.
Yep.
That's what people don't realize, man. We're sweating, standing on concrete all day, getting wet. Like I said, I completely doused myself right before this interview with hot water. Just part of the job. It's
right.
I'm not saying it doesn't have its perks, right? And things, but I mean, it's not, we're not just sitting around drinking beer all the time.
Right.
And I think that's a huge misconception about the industry.
I would agree. So what's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now, and how are you tackling it?
Well, I mean, I think some of that has to do, I think there are multiple challenges in brewing right now. I do think the concentration of breweries is making things challenging, but it doesn't have to be that, right? Like I said, the one thing about this industry that has always surprised me, and I think is awesome, is the collaborative nature of it. I mean, yeah, we're all competitors in a way. I mean, we're all competing for market share.
Mm-hmm.
in your local community. But as brewers, and a lot of times brewery owners, we also want to support each other, right? We have networks where, hey, you know what? I need a bag of Maris Otter. Does anybody have one? We'll all send out texts because we all texts and emails and help each other out. And man, I just love that. And then just the collaborative nature of coming together and working on something still surprises me about the industry.
Yeah, it's still, I mean, you're starting to see a little bit of that community fade.
Right.
But it's still much more in this industry than any other.
Any that I've experienced. But so I guess challenges and challenging wise for us right now, I'm going to be honest with you, and this might sound, I'm not trying to sound like it, but my biggest challenge right now is producing enough beer to keep up with the demand that there is. Our tap room, we've been very, very fortunate to have an extremely, extremely supportive community in Tega Cay and Fort Mill. Because like I said, we're literally right here on the border. I mean, you could put either address on our address for Stonecrest, whatever, 1175 Stonecrest. If you put Fort Mill on it, you put Tega Cay on it, guess what? It's going to get here. Right. But we pay taxes to Tega Cay. so we're a Tega Cay brewery.
There you go.
But no, we've had an extremely supportive community, and man, it's about all I can do during these spring and summer months to keep my tap list full, right? But I have demand from some local restaurants that want to carry our beer and things, and it's tough for me to say, but I was like, I can't guarantee you that I can keep you in that beer just because we're a 7-barrel system.
Right.
We've already had to grow. Like when we were open for the first couple of months, I was like, guys, I'm moving through 2 tanks of beer a week to my 7-barrel fermenters, and I can't do that because beer takes 2 to 3 weeks minimum to be ready before I can have it on the tap. Lagers much longer than that.
Yes,
I was like, I need more fermentation vessels. So it's the best problem that you can have.
I was going to say, it's one of those good problems.
And that's why I said I don't want to sound like we're selling a lot of beer. But it's still a problem in terms of for me, it stresses me out. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I gonna drop a tap? But yet, I've got these places that want beer. So right now, that's my biggest challenge. Personally, as doing the job that I'm doing here. It could be a lot worse, I'm glad it's not. My challenge being that I need to move through beer faster. For me, it can slow down a little bit.
What he's saying is,
I'm
need
not
to
saying
stop drinking beer.
No. I thought about the way that sounded for a minute. Please come to Model A, especially if you haven't tried it. And if you like, a classic balanced style beer, hopefully. Not that I don't do things but I'll do things with fruit. I'm not saying that. I'll do those things, but I do them in a different way, right? If like even my sours, I've got a guava sour I'm about to keg here later this week. I mean, it's not like drinking guava puree with vanilla. It's a beer that is guava flavored. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
With real ingredients. It's beer. I like to make beers that are beer first. You taste the beer, and then whatever I've got going alongside of it comes along second. I know that sounds weird.
Yeah.
But that's the way the market has tended to trend. A lot of ways is in some beers I have a hard time finding the beer, which seems weird to me. Right. I guess you could say, that can happen with food too. I mean, you put too many ingredients on a burger, pretty soon you're not tasting the burger anymore. You're just tasting everything you put on it.
Right.
And I feel like beer has leaned that way, some recently, and not again, drink what you like. But a lot of people maybe don't want to taste the beer.
Right.
Seems weird. From a brewer standpoint, though.
But I have heard I don't even like beer, but I like this.
Well, exactly.
So,
and that's again, drink what you like.
Right.
But my viewpoint on beer is it should always, first and foremost, taste like beer.
Yeah.
And everything else follow.
Absolutely. So, what's the most important lesson that you've learned in your career?
To make sure that you wear gloves when using periacetic acid sanitizer. That's one, definitely, for sure. I don't know, probably just for me, the lesson I've learned would be, that was the question, right? What's the lesson you've learned? And it's to give yourself some grace. Because I tend to worry about the beer too much and what people think of the beer too much. Again, I think that's probably most people who are kind of passionate about what they do. I think that's probably their MO.
Right.
But at the same time, it's at the end of the day, it is just beer.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's a product that people can enjoy. They don't need. It's a luxury item, so to speak.
Right.
And so, and people have different tastes, and sometimes I got to let myself.
Of course, I don't know. That could be debatable. It may be a need.
Well, there was a time in history where it actually very much was a need.
Yeah.
Right. Like the beer was safer than the water.
Absolutely.
Right. Because of the process it went through, which I also find fascinating. But it's lesson wise, I've really had to teach myself to not take everything to heart so much, just in terms of the fact that, to give an example, I love olives. My wife can't stand them. She don't want olive touching her food. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want whatever. I could come on olives, man. I could eat the jar of olives and drink the juice afterwards, right? And she hates them, but that's because people's tastes are different.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And, there's that naive part of, I think, every brewer that's like, oh, man, I put out a great beer. Everybody's going to love it. I learned very quickly everybody is not going to love that beer.
Yep.
And
Untapped will tell you that.
this all the time. It will tell me that. But I've learned over time that, people have different tastes, and it's okay. I still, I might whine about it for a day or two, but I've learned to cut myself some grace. I think that's a pretty good lesson to learn, especially if you're going to have some longevity in this industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what is the most important personality trait or strength that someone needs to be successful in a head brewing position?
I think it could go lots of different ways. I think you do have to have. I think the most important trait is being willing to learn. But that really goes. Again, you're talking to a former teacher. Mm-hmm. The industry does change, and like I said, I'm trying to balance my viewpoint as a brewer, wanting to brew balanced beer, but also keep up with the trends.
Right.
And I just got to find my balance for that, right? But if you're not willing to progress in the industry, just like anything else, you'll go stagnant. Mm-hmm. And I think willing to understand that, educate yourself about beer styles. And if you care about beer styles, like I feel like there's some breweries now that are kind of doing that anti-establishment thing where we're not, who needs guidelines? And they've got their space. I'm glad there are breweries out there doing that thing, mm-hmm. right? They're not competing with the drinkers that we necessarily want here. I'm glad they're doing it. But I do think even if you're doing that, it's good to be informed about history. Right. and classic beer styles.
Yes. I'm fascinated about the history of beer.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating, beer history in itself is a fascinating topic. Which that's one thing I like to do as well, as I like to try to delve into some of that history and brew some historical beers. I've got a beer in the tank right now called the Kottbusser that was nearly extinct in Germany because it did not adhere to the Reinheitsgebot. It didn't adhere to the purity law. Right? It has a little bit of molasses and honey in it. That beer almost went extinct until somebody found records of it. Right.
Yeah, nice.
And said, oh, let's start trying to bring this back. There have been some other local breweries. I know Hellman out of Asheville did one for something at one point. I think for Bière de Femme.
I've seen a few that have popped up over the years.
Yeah, I did one earlier, but I've got one now. Made some tweaks to it, just because I like kind of delving into that.
Right.
I think that's interesting. Right.
Yes.
No, it's not your typical German beer because it has these ingredients in it, but
right.
I think it's fun to kind of resurrect those. I think Dogfish Head really started that, right? I mean, which is so cool. I mean, resurrecting ancient beers. Right?
Yes.
What were the people of the past drinking? That's a really cool thing to think about.
Oh yeah, it is.
So now they took it to the next level. I mean, I didn't send anything off to a lab and have it analyzed. Like,
I'm waiting for somebody to come up with the Egyptian beer.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they did. I mean, at Dogfish, I don't know whether you know about their Midas Touch and the history they're in and how they analyzed ancient vessels that they found. Had them DNA analyzed.
Was that from Midas Touches? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they found that they're literally resurrecting with modern ingredients. It's still not going to be the same, but like it's beer archaeology.
Nice.
Is really what they did a lot of, and I think that's cool as hell.
That is cool.
Think about it.
That is cool.
So I mean, that history aspect really fascinates me. Do I know? Have I ever had a copbuster that? No, I don't know if it just tastes the same, but based on the description, I'm trying to reproduce that.
Right. Right.
I don't have a lab or anything.
It's going to be your version.
Yeah. But I still think that's fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It keeps things interesting for me as well.
Cool. So, what is one piece of advice that you give someone starting out in brewing?
Well, if wanting to start out in brewing, perhaps the first thing is just to get your foot in the door. If you're interested in a career in brewing, I mean, obviously, guys, there's lots of good options out there. I mean, people are constantly needing help at breweries. Like I said, it's a labor-intensive product. So for me, what that looked like was, I was teaching full time, was looking at potentially making a change after 20 years. And I was like, I'm never going to see that change come to fruition unless I put myself out there. So I actually got a job. I had met Travis Tolson from More Artists, and said, "Hey, man, I would be interested." This was even before they opened, and maybe doing some work for you guys if you're needing some help. Just ended up serving beer there on the weekends, and through the homebrew and those connections, when Rock Hill Brewing was looking for somebody, Travis was the first person to recommend me. Right, he knew I wanted to be on the brew side. He'd already hired Jesse, which is an awesome hire. That dude is a beast.
Yes.
And so Travis was like, we don't really need help in the brew house. He knew that's where I wanted to be.
Right.
When one of the owners of Rock Hill came to him and was like, "Hey, man, do you know anybody?" He was like, "Oh, actually, I do." But again, that's that collaborative effort. I mean, I was working for him, but he knew where I wanted to be. Right. And was looking out for that. And that's kind of how it happened. But I would say for anybody looking to get into industry, just get your foot in the door. Yeah. Do something. Right. You're not gonna find an occupation in beer if you're not around the beer production. I mean, it's just, obviously there are other avenues. There's sales. There's all kinds of other stuff that you can be in. So I guess kind of from that, I know you said from in the industry, but I think just more importantly, if you're wanting to be a part of the industry, you got to get your foot in the door. Right. Absolutely. So
who has been your most important professional mentor or mentors?
Well, that's a good, man. I would say, I've worked. So again, that kind of goes back to the collaborative aspect of it. I don't know that I could go back to one individual, more so as collectively, just people in this industry and brewers in this industry, honestly having conversations and trying to help each other out. Like I said, Travis was working for him. He was interested in helping me move forward with what I wanted to do, which was extremely helpful. I don't know if I go back to just the community of beer in Fort Mill, Rock Hill, York County, Yoco, Brew Trail. I would say all those guys. I mean, we're in communication with each other constantly and pushing each other forward in this industry. Josh Williams at Dust Off and we are constantly sharing ideas and talking. Ron Fasek at Slow Play, Zach McNeely at Legal Remedy. We're just constantly pushing talking about beer and saying, hey,
Right.
what are you doing next? What are you doing? All of those guys. Like I said, I already mentioned Travis at Moore.
Well, I think these breweries down here are more tight knit than probably anywhere else.
Well,
I think y'all do more things. I mean, all the breweries collectively.
Yeah.
Than anywhere.
Yeah. And it's part. Some of that is because of the county. So I don't know whether, to some of the listeners out there, if you guys know about what's called the Yoko Brew Trail, which is York County, supported by our county itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's tourism money,
right?
Into helping support the local brew community.
They still they had some kind of passport app.
Yeah, exactly what they do. They have a passport that you can get, and then there's some prizes at the end of it. It lets you know what the other local breweries are, and it's great to get that support from the local community, but as brewers itself, like I said, I don't think there's one person that I can point to so much as multiple people that we're constantly talking. We run into a problem. Hey, what are you doing about this, right? And it is so collaborative from that standpoint that it's energizing. Mm-hmm. Just because I know if I run into an issue, I've got people I can talk to about it. So that's kind of a weird answer, but it's not. I would say right. I've had multiple mentors in the industry, particularly those local brewers in my direct community, which is York County, South Carolina.
Awesome. So what's one thing about your job that almost no one agrees with you about?
Everybody should agree with me. No, they shouldn't. I would say that, again, this might sound a little odd to say, but growth in the industry always seems like an amazing thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, again, this is not, I want Model A to grow and continue to grow and continue to push. But I think in the industry, people need to look at when you get to a point of growth where, okay, is this growth going to help what's going on with our brewery or bottom line, or is it going to hinder it? Mm-hmm. Right. And by hinder, I just mean through expense. This is an expensive industry, equipment, space, time. And I think that's a constant juggle to try to figure out what size brewery, how many barrels of production is going to peak your efficiency and your profit. I mean, because ultimately that's what you have to consider. And sometimes I think, the viewpoint in the industry is growth. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? The only way forward is growth, right? But then I see an industry trend where a lot of these breweries, they're having to team up, they're having to publish because now they're producing more beer because the beer industry has grown so much and there's so much beer on the shelves that they're producing all this beer and couldn't sell it all regionally, so they're having to expand and push their distribution further. Look at, for instance, again, I mentioned Dogfish Head earlier, Dogfish Head and Sam Adams having to join forces to increase their distribution and how they can distribute because they grew so rapidly. They grew their own industry through just talking about and pushing for craft beer. Right. That they actually, unfortunately, it kind of folded in on them, right? Mm-hmm. It was kind of an implosion kind of thing. Right. They were so forward and still are to this day, both of those guys, both of those CEOs, or owners, actually. I don't know, they probably have different CEOs now, but, Sam Cook and Sam Calagione are so, they built this industry, really helped build it. And then all of a sudden, all of that growth cannibalized itself. And now they're like, oh my gosh, we've lost market share to what we built.
Right.
And so we have to go further. We have to join forces. And so, like I said, it's just interesting. That's just an interesting aspect about the community and understanding. And a lot of people may not agree with me. You know, so grow when you can grow, and I get that aspect as well.
Right. Well, I actually recently had a conversation with the owner, and you know, he's like, we have no interest in going outside of our little place right here.
Yeah.
You know, and they've been around for 11, 12 years.
And that's great.
Yeah, and they just right here.
I mean, they're obviously serving the community they want to serve, and I guess that's why I said it might sound like a weird answer, but and every brewery is going to have to decide that for themselves. But I think a lot of people are like, what do you mean? You've got a great product. Everybody needs to have it.
Right.
Does everybody need to have it?
Yep.
Or do we have a really good thing going on right here?
Right.
And we should just protect that.
Yep.
It may not be a popular answer, like you said.
You have to make, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's different for everybody, because the prospect of growth is always exciting.
Right.
But is it always the right thing?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
So, what's your favorite productivity hack?
Oh. I tend to take the slow way on things. And I probably shouldn't. I would say in terms of productivity, there is some neat stuff that I've actually have been exploring in terms of, I love lagers. There's lots of cool development happening in the yeast industry. Different strains and hybridized yeast strains that are making the capability of producing a lager in shorter periods of time, whether it be lagering under pressure, whether it be, like I said, hybridized yeast strains that you're getting all those cool, crisp qualities of a lager, but you're able to ferment at a slightly warmer temperature, which speeds up the fermentation process. So I'm just now beginning to explore those myself. Lager strains that produce much less sulfur, so they don't need as much lagering time. And so, I mean, productivity for me, exploring some of these other yeast strains, getting outside my comfort zone, and exploring some of those. Just recently, I just tried a new lager strain on my Mexican lager. Super happy with it. Was able to cut 2 weeks out of that time by exploring. I think I might try another one. May not stick with it. Super happy with the product. But so I would say try to go outside your comfort zone every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And explore some of those new products that are going out there. There's also been a lot of enzyme research recently that has helped, particularly enzymes to help. I talked about the hop creep earlier in diacetyl production. There are enzymes now that you can add during your fermentation to eliminate that, which seriously helps on the time that those beers take in the tank. Because if that hop creep comes in and you've got diacetyl present, the only solution to that is time and letting the yeast continue to do its stuff. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you haven't removed the yeast at that point. But there are products now that are out there to assist brewers in the production of beer to prevent some of those things. That, again, I think that's awesome. That's moving the industry forward.
Right.
And then there's also that stubborn part of me that's like, I have to lager it for 8 weeks. I have to because
that's the way it's supposed to be done.
Right. And that's that reliance.
We've always done it that way.
Exactly. And so I fight that nature in myself.
Right.
But let's be honest. I mean, chemistry and advancements in those technologies they're fantastic things. I mean, single infusion brew houses, like most craft breweries have, meaning you basically hold the mash at one temperature. That wouldn't have been possible unless they started modifying malts, right, to get better extraction at a single infusion versus a step mash. So, I mean, just embracing some of that change, I think, is also good. I mean, you could embrace that change and still hold true to the styles of beer. And so fighting with myself constantly to do that. But I mean, it has definitely saved some time, production time.
Nice.
Which time is money.
Absolutely.
So
what underrated tool is indispensable for your job?
Underrated tool. Maybe for me, that is probably my CIP card. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's one of those things that I just I utilize it constantly. CIP card is clean in place card. I'm one of these people. You know, I empty a fermenter, I clean it immediately. Again, I'm a team of one, so I kind of have to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the brew house, that's what I spend my most time with. I told you, cleaning. It's basically
right.
It's basically a portable dishwasher. It's just really big dishes I'm cleaning. 7-barrel and 15-barrel fermenters.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who do it without the actual cart that you can have that you can move from place to place and do whatever. And you know, I don't know. For me, maybe it's
right.
Moving individual kegs of fluid around and stuff with cleaner in them. That's not for me. For me, I think the having that cart is indispensable to me. Like
awesome.
And air conditioning. I swear. No, listen. You think I'm kidding? If you want me to brew in your brew house, unfortunately, of course, I'm older than some of these young bucks that are out there doing it. You got to have air conditioning. I go to places like I went to Revelry in Charleston over the summer. Not this summer, but last summer. And man, they're brewing in Charleston in an unconditioned airspace. And I know a lot of brewers are going to hate me for this comment because they're out there brewing now. So literally just, and they're like, oh, just suck it up, buttercup, you know? But you know, I'm kind of a skinny, gangly guy, but even skinny guys can chafe when you're sweating that bad. I'm not here for it, man. So yeah, kind of spoiled. So yeah, air conditioning is definitely an indispensable tool,
right?
For me at this point in the game. And I admire all of you dudes out there that brew in unair conditioned spaces, especially in places like Charleston.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you could start a business tomorrow, what would it be?
What would it be? Well, I mean, honestly, I mean, you know, I'm in brewing.
Yeah.
I would like it to be something associated with that if I were to start my own business. But
right.
No, actually, funny story. So before I didn't land the job at Rock Hill Brewing, which was my introduction into professional brewing, I had actually still very passionate about home brewing and supporting home brewers. And actually had written a business plan to open up a homebrew shop with a micro nano brewery. But what was funny is before I had, you know, as I was writing that business plan, the opportunity at Rock Hill Brewing came up. It kind of an interesting story there. Not that we need to go into it, but it's kind of one of those divine intervention things. I'll kind of sum it up. I had told the school I was teaching at, I was like, guys, I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to be coming back next year. And they were going through some other changes and really wanted me to stay and offered me a bunch of money to stay.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, as a teacher, I was like, dang, you know, I had been writing this business plan. I was like, maybe I should stay for another year, take that money, that raise, put it in the account to use towards the homebrew business I was thinking about starting. And so I was talking myself into my hour and a half drive to work. I was talking myself into going back to school for another year and teaching for another year. And I had to give them that decision that day. It was on the Friday. They'd already allotted me like almost 2 weeks to make the decision because I was like, you gotta give me time because I already knew I had these things in the works, right?
Right.
And I had to go in. It was Friday afternoon, driving to work, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to teaching. I'm gonna take the job. And I happened to, as I was getting off the exit 30 for Davidson, I happened to look down at the radio, and the song had not come on yet. But you know how your song scrolls across, the title comes across. And the title literally said, "Go Your Own Way." Fleetwood Mac was about to pop up. I'm getting off on my exit. Radio says, "Go your own way." Even though I had just talked myself into going back to school for another day, I was like, oh my gosh. You're like, I'm not going to come back. I'm going to tell them I'm done.
Yep.
Because of what the radio said. It sounds crazy, but no, listen to this. So then I went home.
Looking for a sign.
Told my wife got home. She was working from home at the time. Got home. I said, hey, can you take a pause for a minute and just listen to this? And, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's probably going to think I'm crazy. And she was like, no, that's great, and whatever. So I went to the fridge, cracked a beer, sat down on the couch. This is all the same day. And then I get this message from somebody I don't even know on my phone. And it says, no context, no name. It says, hey, heard you might be interested in a job at a brewery or brewing. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is all on the same day. And I was like, yeah, I'd potentially be interested in a job for brewing, but who am I talking to?
Yeah.
And it happened to be that connection I told you that Travis had given my number to the people looking, whatever. So kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I owe part of my career to Fleetwood Mac, which is not a bad, hey.
No, that's not bad at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Rumor is one of the best albums of all time.
Absolutely. So is there any other occupation that you would like to try?
Oh, occupation-wise that I'd like to try. I don't know. I mean, I probably miss my calling on basketball. It's really too late for that. If I could have gone back and utilized some of my height, that probably would have been a good thing.
So how tall are you?
So currently I'm a little over 6'9" at my peak. And I say that because I've had 3 back operations, which I lost almost an inch after my first one. I was right at about 6'11".
Oh, wow.
Which is just mutant tall to not do anything related to basketball or really sports in general.
Right.
I'd go back and utilize. I like basketball.
Yeah.
I look more like Jack the Pumpkin King from Nightmare Before Christmas when I was growing up. I was basically just a skinny skeleton with a little bit of flesh and just, I don't know. That was all. I think my body was growing so fast I couldn't keep up with my coordination.
Right.
So sports like that just didn't really work for me.
Yep.
In terms of things that I'd like to try, God, there's so much. I have so many hobbies, and they're all laborious, and that's what I don't want to understand. I have a 1959 Plymouth that I work on, but do I want to be an auto mechanic? No. After struggling with that thing for these multiple years, I love doing it and hate doing it all at the same time. I've had saltwater fish tanks. I keep dart frogs. I mean, always,
Oh, yeah. I saw one of your posts.
People are like, don't make your hobbies careers. I did that with brewing and I still love it.
Right.
So part of me thinks, oh my gosh, would I love to do that? But if I had one answer, I love, my wife and I ran a little antique booth, focusing on mid-century stuff. I have a whole 60s, 70s lounge in my house. If I could probably do anything else, it would be like running an antique mall. Okay. Sounds weird. I love that crap. I love that crap, man. Going to estate sales, thrift finds, Goodwill, doing all that, man. If you could make a career out of it, I think it's tough.
Yeah.
I would love to do that, but I like to garden. I like to do whatever. I like plant. I don't know. I've got lots of different hobbies. I think a lot of brewers are the same way.
Yeah.
We dabble. I've had saltwater, like I said, saltwater fish tank. That's work, work, man.
Yeah.
My wife was like, why are all your hobbies work? I guess I like to keep my hands busy. That's what it amounts to.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, my wife's kind of the same way. She's like, why do you do? She goes, it takes you forever to do this and to do that. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what it takes, but I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the difference. I don't know. Yep. I need an easy hobby like reading. I don't know, but I like to I like to keep my hands busy.
Yep.
That's what it amounts to.
So far this year, what is your favorite 3 craft beers?
Oh gosh. Oh, that I've had. Okay. So I'm assuming you mean not beers that I brewed. Do you mean beers that Model A has produced, or do you mean outside beers?
Whatever.
Okay. Well, so one that stands out to me is there's a beer by Birds Fly South out of Greenville called Saison is Dead. And it's been within the year, but we had the South Carolina Brewers Guild put on a beer show there. And I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing beer. Like, I don't know. It just hit all the notes for me.
Right.
That one definitely stands out at the top of my list. I went to, without a shadow of a doubt, I went to Denver for the first time in April of this past year. And then there's Beer Stott out there that does nothing but lagers and does a lager house. And oh my gosh, man, their slow pour Pilsner on draft at the brewery. I looked at my wife. I had the beer and I was like, man, I don't even know why am I even doing what I'm doing? You know what I mean? I had one of those moments. And then I had their Vienna Lager and their Doppelbock. And I was like, man, it was just, I was in heaven and questioning what I'm doing brewing it all, Right. Having those beers, it's kind of one of those love-hate relationships. I was like, oh my gosh, guys, this is amazing. I hate you. You know what I mean? But they're doing things that I don't necessarily have the capability to do currently. I mean, they're doing old world stuff. I mean, they're getting under modified malt. They're doing multiple step mashes and decoction and stuff like that I did experiment with as a home brewer. Right. Don't necessarily have the capability to do. And can I brew amazing lagers without it? Yeah, sure can. But it's just that there's just, man, about a true decocted lager. There's just another level that you can reach. And they certainly did. So all of those beers stand out in my mind. Trying to think of maybe if that was, because I would say all of those really, I probably could have done 1, 2, 3 at their place. Because I'm a lager. Well, no, I think I'll make my third. Again, I love lagers, but Creature Comforts, Bebo, their Pilsner.
Yep. That would be one of mine this year too.
It's just righteous. I mean, it's not been just this year. I've been drinking that beer for a couple of years, but it's one of those ones. And I can't go without just, I mean, I probably drink more Sierra Nevada beer commercially than any other place.
Same.
And I just love their products just in general. I mean, Summerfest.
I keep Pale Ale in my refrigerator.
But no, I mean, just if doing those three, I think those stand out in my head.
Cool. So, what's one question you wish I had asked you, and how would you have answered?
That's a fine question. I don't know. I didn't know. This is kind of my first time doing this kind of thing, so I didn't know exactly what to expect. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
All right.
So
that's fine. I asked all the questions.
Well, and I think I kind of had some things I wanted to talk about. I think we kind of got around to all of those. Like I said, I think, which I did talk about. I think, had you not asked about, just kind of viewpoint on beer and whatnot, that's something I definitely would have answered. Like I said, find what you like. I do wish, people would find more balance kind of in their beer drinking. But there's plenty of people who do. And as of right now, they're supporting us, and I love it.
Awesome.
So,
alrighty. So, last question.
What's that?
Where can people find you online?
Okay. So, I think Model A for the most part has a presence on most of the platforms. I don't think we have a TikTok, but I think you can hit us on Facebook, Instagram. Would be two easy places, and obviously just our website itself.
Okay. And most of those are like at Model A Brewing.
Yeah. I mean, it should all of that. If you just type in Model A Brewing, obviously, if you just type in Model A, you're going to get a bunch of Model A car clubs and stuff like that. Even the local Charlotte one, they come out to our place actually a good bit, which is awesome. Yeah, you do have to add the brewing to that if you want to find us. Otherwise, you're just going to find lots of information.
Right. Model A Ford.
Model A vehicles, yeah.
Yep. And that's all we have for this episode.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you so much for joining, for opening up your tap room.
Yeah, appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All
and we'll talk to you soon.
Great.
All right.
All right.